was laying in bed and I was like, I have back pain. I'm gonna lay down for an hour. I was like, Jayd can wait.
Yep.
I woke up at 10:30. I said, hmm. No.
And at that point, I
And
was also napping. Otherwise, I would have just done the thing, but nope.
well, you have a show that you're watching, so it feels like you're pretty occupied anyway.
I know. I need to be able to walk away from it. It's getting really bad.
It's walk away from it, like how this team should walk away from a few of its players at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome back to Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken. That's your cold open. We had a week off this past week because, well, outside of Kako being in Four Nations, and I think he only had the one assist
I think so, yeah.
in the what, two games that he played because he didn't play the first game. Um, I mean, you can only do so much when you've got one guy who's playing what, like third line, fourth line minutes maybe in that tournament. You can only do so much with that. So anyway, yeah, we are back. It's nice to be back. Um the Kraken played two games this past week and they've got a few different moves that we'll discuss in this episode outside of those two games. Started off fresh out of the gate and I've been us and a few of our friends, hello again, Milo, have been worried about this back to back immediately out of the Four Nations break, right? Like playing the Florida teams in general isn't necessarily the most fun thing to do, and playing them back to back isn't great either. So, I mean, the Panthers game was fun. They were without Matthew Tkachuk. He suffered an injury during the Four Nations face-off. I think he missed a good chunk of the of one of the USA games, and then in the final, I think he missed a chunk of that as well.
Yeah, that
Um,
sounds right. It's like a hip tear or something from what I heard,
yeah,
read.
now the reports are that he might miss the rest of the season, which,
But then
Jesus.
also, I was telling you before we started recording, I was reading 32 Thoughts and
Mm.
listening to Daily Frank Saravalli, whatever. And I think they both said that they're anticipating him being back at some point in the regular season, but that this is going to be a longer injury. Not that that's part of our team, but it's still good to know.
I
Plenty of
mean,
people are Panthers fans, so
Panther. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's just fascinating, and then I'll get back on focus. But like the injuries he suffered during the Stanley Cup final, what, 2 years ago, where it's like he couldn't go to the bathroom on his own,
Hmm.
and like his body's just a wreck. So, hey, I mean, something karma, something. Anyway, yeah, the game against the Panthers, that's still a good team up and down the lineup. I mean, even being without Matthew Tkachuk is not something that like gave Seattle any betting odds or betting favors. Seattle was on the board first, Capo Caco, fresh out of the Four Nations break. It was funny. I think someone in our group chat was remarking that like how the broadcast was saying these guys should have fresh legs, and it's the guy who'd been playing a bunch over the break that scores first. So Kako gets a goal on the power play. It's really fun to me. Like I know the line, Jayd, the
Hmm.
17-10-84 line has been incredibly productive, and it's essentially Seattle's first real top line in a while, or maybe ever. But seeing the names on this goal and Kako Benir's right is fun for the future. It's nice
Yep.
to see that. This was an interesting power play goal. It wasn't maybe anything super crazy or wacky. Kako just was able to get a lane driving right at the net, and was able to beat Bobrovsky 6 minutes and 32 seconds into the game, which I mean it's pretty nice. Um, Seattle happy to take that first period on the road. And after that goal in the first, they were only a shot behind the Panthers in terms of shots on goal. They only had 6 shots on goal in the next two periods each, which that's not good. That's not very good at all. Etu Luostarinen scores in the second period and sends us into the third period tied up, and that I'm sure that was a little bit nerve-wracking, right? Joey Daccord played incredibly well in this game. I mean, to no one's surprise, nice that he was able to get the Four Nations break off, so he could post his little Instagram posts, um, and Twitter posts too.
Hmm.
That's its own thing. But he played incredibly well. It's always this goes back to the very first episode of the show that we did, where it's like I saw how well that they did, like clogging the lane, clogging the slot, playing defensively, executing their defensive game plan, and then obviously having Joey play so well in the net. Um, like that's how good they can be. And it's just so annoying that they don't do it consistently. Like we've
Yep.
talked about that all the time that this show has existed. Jared McCann gets the eventual game winner in the third period. It's his first goal on an actual goalie, I think, since December 24th was the number that I saw. And his first goal in 10 games, the
I
last
don't think
one
they played on
being
Christmas Eve. Wouldn't it be the
no,
22nd?
probably. I don't think they played on Christmas Eve either. Yeah.
I think
Something
the
in
NHL
late.
takes a break on.
I think I bookmarked it. Let me. Oh, I have so much dumb shit in book. Oh, wow, I used it already. Jeez, sorry. Um, I think Mike Benton tweeted it out, so I'll look for Mike. But like the point remains, it was a long time coming for Jared to
Yeah.
score an actual goalie, and it was just tough because for so long he'd been your leading scorer. 22nd is right. Yep, Jade,
Yep.
of course, on the mark there. Um, And that this was a nice pass. Larson had a nice pass. I think he was right in front of the crease, and he found McCann just to the side, able to get that one there. So, and Shane Wright is second helper in this one. So two helpers for Shane in this game. Joey plays pretty damn well. Who are the first? Yeah, 3 stars: McCann, Decord, Lusterinen, Lusterinen. Um, I mean, again, like you played the Panthers really well at home. You lose in the shootout, which I mean,
Hmm.
again, with the talent that they have, Sasha Barkov, like I understand that, but just to play these good teams so well, granted, the 2 goals and then the 6 shots each in the last 2 periods, not good. Um, it's just so frustrating because if you bring this level of play to a San Jose, an Anaheim, a Chicago, right? Games you've lost earlier in the season that are, so to say, lesser opponents, right? We probably aren't in this situation where oh God, I haven't even looked how many points they're out right now. Um, I'll check. But like we're not in this situation where I'm just don't care anymore, right?
Hmm.
You're 9 points out. No, it's dead until you show me something miraculous.
Hmm.
I'm not getting my hopes up. Like,
Same. Yeah.
um, again, I'd rather be surprised by it than just like, because again, and we'll talk about the Tampa Bay game, but I like considering a few factors, I throw it out the window a little bit. Um, just these. They've the one of the funnier things about the Seattle Kraken over their tenure as an NHL franchise is that every single year, you know, the inaugural season, their faux playoff year, and then the last two disappointing mediocre seasons, they've found a way to beat the good teams, like in the NHL, every once in a while. Some teams less than others. They've only beaten Tampa Bay once. Um, like they've beaten Toronto, they've beaten Boston, they've like they've beaten Florida, they've beaten Winnipeg. They beat the Hurricanes in year one at home. Like
Hmm.
I still remember the wraparound goal that Marcus Johansson had to win that game. Like it's happened and it continues to happen, but the consistency level, um, year one, I throw there are a lot of things, but the last 2 years, it's been their inconsistencies, I think, largely
Yep.
over anything else. Inconsistency and a lack of talent. Like they have talent, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot
Hmm.
of mid. Like,
Very mediocre talent.
so yeah, I don't know. I just wanted because it's again, it's seeing the same thing over and over again, and I'm tired of seeing the same thing
Yep.
over and over again because we can only cover that in such detail outside of telling you, hey, we're seeing the same thing again and
Hmm.
again and again. Like
And then
the
at that point,
defensive,
everything just seems so repetitive. And, we're talking about the same two things every single week about
yeah,
how there's no compete and no uh talent and no desire to win. And yeah, not fun to
like
listen to, not fun to keep talking about.
no, I mean it's like I can only do so much in that regard,
Hmm.
right? Like it is. So, and that's why the thing like I think RJ from Emerald City Hockey was saying it's like they need to like be fun even if you're gonna be bad. Like you need to be entertaining, you know.
Hmm.
Um so yeah, and then the Tampa Bay game was interesting just because I had wondered about this game for a while just because of, obviously the Grubauer move gives you really only one NHL level goalie on the roster at the time. And they'd ridden Joey so hard with his workload, just giving him all these games in a row. I was like, well, if they're still actively trying to be a playoff team, which it seems like they are, they haven't. I don't have a white flag around me, but they haven't waved the white flag yet. That
Hmm.
might change with the deadline next week. Um, but I think, like I was telling Jayd before we started this, I'm worried that, and I might open this up for more of a discussion after the Lightning, after I go over some of the points about the Lightning game. But like, I'm worried that they'll lull themselves back into a sense of mediocrity and that they're close enough to make it and that they have enough of a chance that they won't do anything at the deadline to benefit the franchise going forward, i.e., trading certain guys like a Tanev, so on and so forth. So I am worried about that because, you know, I think changes need to be made. That's been obvious all year. And I don't think there ever was going to be such a massive fire sale. Like, I think people have talked about what they could do about a potential giant fire sale, but like any real reports, like you and I were talking about before we started, there's not been anything substantial lately, reporting wise, about them being involved in anything.
There's
Um,
been a few like little things that I've seen, but we can talk about that after Tampa. We
yeah,
can,
let
yeah,
me
I'll
wrap up
save
Tampa
it.
Bay. I mean, going through the first period, Seattle actually led the game in shots on goal, which was kind of funny. I caught a decent amount of this. I think I was actually recording our Mariners show during this. Um, yeah, get the first period. Stezka looked pretty solid. Alex Stezka makes his NHL debut in this one. I mean, I think he had been playing in Czechia leagues before he got signed to play with Coachella Valley. Um, and then he never appeared in an NHL game until this. He'd been riding the bench with Seattle earlier in the season, with Grubauer dealing with injury, but never appeared in a game. Um, he looked pretty solid. I mean, I won't complain at all about what I saw from him in this game. I've been worried about him on this show, and I think reasonably so, given what we know, right?
Mhm.
Like outside of just being an optimist and looking purely at the numbers, um, and reality, like I think it was reasonable to be a little bit worried.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was pretty solid against one of the better, if not one of the best, statistical offenses in the NHL. Whenever I look at like the goals per game, Tampa Bay's third in goals for per game right now, behind Washington and Winnipeg. They don't shoot a ton. Interesting. Yeah, they're 13th in shots for per game. That's weird. Okay. Anyway, yeah, well, against one of the better offenses in the league. Like, and this was a game, the final score will be very deceptive because Seattle was going into the third period no, down by a goal, just one goal. And um this kind of like flashbang happened in the third period where Nikita Kucherov and Luke Glendening score within what is this, less than 2 minutes of each other. Nick Paul gets an empty netter at the end. Shane Wright did score on a drive-by tip-in to make it 3-1 with less than 5 minutes left, but it's just ultimately too little, too late against an offensive team like Tampa Bay and Andrei Vasilevsky. Um, Vasilevsky. Oh God, has never lost to Seattle. He's 6-0 against Seattle. So
Good for him.
I don't know who they must have played when they beat Tampa Bay on the road in 23. It must have been, huh? I'll look that up some other time. It's not important. But yeah, I mean they played pretty decently well. I mean they dominated the shots in the second period, 18-10. Like they just were playing Andrei Vasilevsky. Like and why I say earlier in the show I'd throw this away is because you're playing Vasilevsky, you're playing the second half of a back-to-back against two of the top teams in the league. Um, and they're their first two games. Like I was listening to the audio from Dan Bylsma from practice 2 days ago, 2 days before the Florida game, sorry. And he expected there to be like some sloppiness for after guys. He was joking about guys being on the beach, probably, i.e., what Brandon Montour was talking about. And he was saying that Jordan Eberle was laughing because he had been practicing with the Firebirds and he was like in some game shape in a way, and he was laughing because everyone else seemed to be. I think the remark was they had red faces because of their tans, but they had red faces because of how hard they've been skating after too. So I was like, oh,
Yep.
all right, Dan, you comedian. Um, yeah, I mean, Steska played pretty damn well for this game, all things considered. Debut, lightning, like, getting the one goal of run support, like I mean, the save percentage isn't gonna be forgiving to him. I don't care. Like, I don't think he's a guy at this point in his career that'll worry about that. Unless at 28 years old, like he goes on this magical run, which I don't imagine he will.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it was 37 shots for Seattle compared to 24 for Tampa Bay. Like, that's frustrating. But yeah, again, I'm not like if you were a few points out of a playoff spot, then I'd be like, okay, you needed this one. You needed to maybe empty the tank a little more. But
Hmm.
you're just not in realistic frame,
It's just not likely at
no.
this point.
So yeah. What we can get into kind of I mean, did you have any thoughts on either of those games?
No, because I slept through the Florida game and was which was totally an accident. I had an alarm set to wake up and didn't hear my alarm go off. And then the game yesterday, I was watching a different show. Which, by the way, if anybody needs a good show to binge, it's Quantico. It's on Hulu, and I can't turn it off. So it's really good.
Oh my God. Yeah. No, so no, we'll do this first. Yeah, I just with with Seattle where they are, right? They're 9 points out of a playoff spot currently, that last spot in the Western Conference. Um, yeah, Vancouver's holding on to that, and they're a mess. Like Vancouver and Calgary have kind of generally held on to the one of the last wild card spots. The top one's just always going to be Colorado just because of the fact that the top three teams in the Central have been so fucking good. Wow.
Hmm.
Okay, I used it early. Um, so like Colorado's gonna hold that spot, I imagine,
Yeah.
unless somehow they just take a free fall. But it's been like Vancouver and Calgary are the teams that have largely been in that second spot, and even them, they've had their own respective issues, you know. Um, and yeah, if Seattle had been able to do much of anything better, like they're not super far off if they play a little better in some of these games to force overtime. We got a comment on one of the last episodes that we did that was like it was just kind of tomfoolery, but I skimmed through it, and at the end it was like bad coaches only get to overtime. I was like, if this team got just to overtime a few more games, we're having a different conversation.
Yep.
Like, ugh, silly. So no, I mean, I talked about it, right? Like I'm generally worried that like last year they were more consistently like a mediocre. This year they're
Hmm.
less consistently mediocre. I'm just worried that they're gonna be in the same sort of mindset as they were last year, where they say, "Oh, we're close. We're gonna." I think the terminology from Ron Francis last year was that we want to give these guys the opportunity to go and try, and we owe him that much. And I'm
Yep.
like, sure. Like obviously they parted ways with Alex Wenberg. Um, that's a whole other discussion. Um, you know, and good for Wenny being in San Jose. Like that team does look like fun, even if they are bad. Um, God bless him and Felicia. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I'm worried that they're okay with being mediocre. And well, maybe I can talk a little bit about this. Uh, CEO Todd Lewicki was on the KJR does this like President's Day show every year where they um they have a bunch of the presidents of a bunch of different teams, not all of them, right? A bunch of different teams around the area give like a State of the Union kind of thing, right? And the wiki was on, and he said a few things that made sense to me, but kind of put people up in arms. Um, I'll only kind of mention what's relevant because he said some other things here. He said that ownership does want to win now. The goal is to be a sustained playoff team. He said that they fared well on the NHL player survey, specifically on the facilities, which is nice. Like outside of the hockey itself, you want people to actually want to be here and to
Hmm.
say good things about your organization and all that. Like it's always interesting when the NFL does that survey. And see which teams like treat families poor or their facilities are bad. Da, 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 da.
Hmm.
The kind of further on the ownership thing, he says we want to have a team that doesn't just make the playoffs but stays in the playoffs. Um, I didn't think any of this was crazy. I don't like I don't think he said anything wild. Like, and then the thing about ownership, um, he said that there are some areas the team can add and doesn't think they need to rebuild, which goes into the whole retooling thing that I think every one of us in the like Kraken Mediascape has talked about.
Hmm.
This past year, he cited, that they've got a new coaching staff, which I know Silvia, when we've had Silvia on, she has mentioned that consistently, right? The need to score more, which, duh.
Yep.
um Loss of your captain for a long part of the season, and he said, I don't think this is a rebuild, this is a reclamation, just a different fancy word for retool. Like, and people were like, oh, there are people who just wanted to tear it down, and people were mad, like that thought maybe the win now comment was that they buy at the deadline. I
Hmm.
don't think like that's not what they mean. It goes back to what we've talked about consistently throughout the show, um, and we talked about at different like media things that we've done, whether it's written or whatever, or stuff I've done like with like RJ, like considering that the NBA should be here in the next, say, 5 years, that the announcement should come in the next 5 years. The Celtics need to sell because David Bonderman, who passed, who's part of the Kraken ownership, had stake in the Celtics. He can't have stake in two teams, so they had to sell his stake. Then he died, so they've got to deal with that estate. The Celtics still need to sell. Um, but anyway, just imagine like the fact of the matter is that an NBA team is like more than likely coming here,
Hmm.
right? And adding
It's
to
like
the
almost
busy,
imminent at
yeah,
this point.
yeah, imminent's great. Thank you.
Yep.
Like they're already in a crowded. Hello, hello. Zoom in on me, thank you. I know I'm not that pretty, but goddamn. Um, you're already in a busy sports city.
Hmm.
Do I need to reference the number of teams we cover? Right?
No.
And there's 10 of them that are pro. Okay. Like, and especially given with the NBA team that during your NHL season, the NBA is running during that season. The
Hmm.
NFL will be running during that season. Soccer is in kind of both just because they go into the winter, well, they go into the late fall and they start in the late winter. It's like there is
Baseball
overlap.
starts back up and spring
There's
training.
overlap, right? Like, and especially given that, the newness of this team has worn off. Yes, your branding is still great. That's never changed.
Hmm.
But like the novelty is gone. And it's not just, oh, I just want to go and see what it's like. That's gone.
Yep.
Like I think the vast majority of those people have done it already, and the people that do want to do it are either getting priced out or it's just not entertaining because they're not winning, right?
Which I think is, now that you say that, that makes me think that that's probably why we've seen so many visiting fans, or
Hmm.
so many away
Hmm.
jerseys when we're at games,
Yeah.
because it's people either traveling with their team because we've never done a Seattle game before, so let's go check
Yes.
it out despite the price. And um also, I being a fan of teams that aren't in Seattle, I know that I really look forward to when the teams that I support come here, because then I get to go see them. And so yeah, I think that a lot of the newness has worn off.
Yeah, that's a great point though that the newness for away fans is probably
Hmm.
still there. Um, but not necessarily obviously for the folks in the state of Washington anymore. Um, so, like there's a lot of factors and I am getting to a point here. But like so that's gone. Even folks who maybe have liked it already, maybe if they want to come back, they can't afford it. Like
Hmm.
I have a cousin who, came from the Philippines, but five years ago during 2020. That was a big culture shock to just come here and then come here during a pandemic. God bless him. Um, but like, I mean, he likes to check out the sports stuff. He does through all of our coverage, and he'd like to do more Kraken stuff, but it's expensive.
Yep.
He's like, we were looking at ticket prices yesterday, and that Vancouver game, like the cheapest to get in is like at least $100.
Hmm.
Like that's not cheap. Let alone if you're hungry, if you want to try to park somewhere, like if you do want to drink, like it's not cheap. The Wild game is much cheaper for some reason. I'm like, aren't the Wild a better team? Anyway,
Yeah.
um, so there's that. There's the fact that they're not winning. It's like being priced out, the newness being gone. Like they're not winning. They're not
Hmm.
fun. They don't have a star. You don't have like I go back to the University of Washington, the men's basketball team hasn't really been good for a while. And even a few years ago, even throughout the years, they've been fun to watch because they will get guys, largely because the state of Washington is so great for basketball talent. They'll get guys who are entertaining, like Markel
Hmm.
Fultz, who got drafted pretty high, and he's had his own struggles. God bless Markel. He was like people would pack the gym at UW. That team was bad. They were near the bottom of the Pac-12, but they would go because Markel would do something fun.
Yep.
Like, they don't have that right now.
And
We
it's not
might
like,
talk as much as we can about Joey and all that,
hmm
but not enough people are aware of that.
it's not like we're a team like, oh, I cannot believe I'm about to say this, but it's not like we're the Devils with like Jack Hughes and
Nah.
uh or the Sharks with Macklin Celebrity and Will Smith. And the only players that are coming to my mind are players that I'm not a fan of. Anyways, it's
Woo.
not like we have, like Seattle has some phenomenal, one of the best players in the league kind of thing, or a brand new rookie that's just killing it this year. They just don't have that.
No, and like Shane Wright, to his credit, has been playing well, and I'm happy where he is in his development and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But like like you said, it's no like over the top, guy in that sort of regard. Like Macklin's who I think of. Like if I was in San Jose and I was just a fan, I would get tickets to games just to go see him and Will Smith,
Hmm.
truthfully, right? So, and the other part of it is that San Jose like hockey fan base has been around a decent amount of time
Yep.
as compared to this, where it's like I'll be one of the first people to say, hey, like Seattle has had hockey. Like there was some stupid article in the Times lately that was like, can Seattle ever be a hockey town? And I was like, well, it kind of already has been.
Yeah.
Like with whether it be the Metropolitans way back in the day, there's been women's teams here, there's been men's teams here, obviously the Thunderbirds and the Silvertips. Like,
Hmm.
shut up. Um, but it's like still even those fans of the Thunderbirds and the Silvertips, they're more for a myriad of reasons, more willing to go to those games, you know, one, because it's cheaper, um, and stay in those markets. Like
Yep.
you haven't captured enough of the fan base here, and you're still working to do so. And
Hmm.
so, like all of that to say, which is a long ramble, and I apologize, like there are a lot of reasons why ownership wants to win now.
Yep.
Like, you know, I mean, we all saw how good things were year two when they
Hmm.
actually went to the playoffs and won consistently. Like, if you're able to build a franchise, you know, like the ones around the different sports, the Packers, the Spurs used to do it all the time. You know, the Phillies are a team that goes to the play, like all these teams that go to the playoffs
Hmm.
consistently, right? Like they do well financially
Yep.
and on their respective field, right? And so
Yep.
there's a lot of reasons for ownership to want to win now, and like Todd was saying, be a team that doesn't just get there, that goes deep. Um, I don't think they're in a position to tear it all down and rebuild. Because what is the timeline for that look like, right? San Jose's kind of already done that. Like they went to a cup what within the last few decades, and they're like I got a little bit scared when I saw them get Celebrini. I was like, all right, like how long is this gonna take this team to contend? But
Hmm.
who knows when they like actually legitimately put it together, right?
Yeah. There
You
was
don't
a
know.
joke on 32 Thoughts today. Yeah, I kind of like doing this on Mondays because then I get to reference that because that
Nah,
usually comes out Monday mornings. I think it was 32 Thoughts though, or no, maybe it was no, it's a Daily Face Off show. Somebody made a joke about how how much longer are we gonna have to wait for this 13-year Sabres rebuild? And like that's a really good point for the people that are d demanding, insisting that Seattle needs to rebuild because sure, that's all fun to say, but then you're going another shit. Even Philadelphia's been in a rebuild for a while, the new era of orange that it still really sucks. But you're just waiting and waiting and waiting for greatness to come, and then that upsets fans even more because they're waiting even longer. So yeah, the whole rebuild now thing has always just kind of it's frustrating to see people talk about.
it's tough because at the end of the day, like with how the expansion draft went and how you weren't able to wheel and deal like Las Vegas did because everyone said,
Hmm.
"Hey, no, I know what you want to do." Like
Yep.
ideally that would have been okay, we're gonna draft well, we're gonna develop those players, and we're gonna be bad for like again, I remember this because I was there. The
Hmm.
first 4 to 5 years, we're gonna be bad. But when we get to those 4 to 5 years, we'll start to be that contending team and we'll have built it so that it's sustainable to keep drafting well and win and keep having waves of talent come in, right? They've drafted well, yes, but
Hmm.
again, I just like it would be really great. I don't know if someone will ever do it before me, but to look at a deep dive of how that year two skewered so much, not only for the organization, but obviously the fan base as well. Like it was great, yes, and it was great to grab some fans with that then. Like we have
Hmm.
friends who reference year two all the time, right? And I'm like, it's not, it's that is an outlier,
Yep.
not not a consistency. Like it was a blip, unfortunately.
Hmm.
So
Which
it
then I
just
know I see a lot of comparison between Seattle and Vegas too, in that same regard, where Vegas is consistently making playoffs and they're doing better, and then you look at Seattle and it's just not quite the same. So I see a lot of that comparison as well, and that also it doesn't seem realistic to
no.
compare the two.
No, and another thing, and it's great that you bring that up because I feel like I've talked about this part in previous shows as well, is that, you know, with Vegas, like the Kraken have they've made some under the radar sort of trades, right? Like
Hmm.
with Bjorkstrand is going to be a cap dump. Not a cap dump, but they had to sh free up some space, right, with Gaudreau.
Hmm.
Um, with Kako, that was a swap for sort of an under the radar defenseman and a forward that needed a new change of scenery, right?
Hmm.
Like the other guys they've gotten via trade, it's like Victor Rask, Tomasz Tatar, like they're not really big names, right? They
Yeah.
haven't made the big swing in that regard. They haven't pulled a resource, a prospect, and they haven't done that yet. They've
Hmm.
made swings in free agency, yes, and I will always think that the Stevenson and Montour signings were pressured on Ron, to make big deals. Even going back to Grubauer and like Burakovsky, like I understand why they did that, given what he'd come off of and his talent. Like
Hmm.
I understand that. Grubauer, I can understand why you wanted to bring him in coming off the Vezina level play. The term, ooh,
Yeah.
um, that's why again I was concerned with the Decord term this offseason. Seems to be, oh my God, the dog downstairs. It seems to be working out. Um, but yeah, like you have to look at this franchise, at least with the free agents and with some of the decisions that they make, under the lens that it comes with them wanting to win, to because it's best for business and because they
Hmm.
do want to grab hold of some of that fan base before the NBA comes here and really kind of takes a lot of attention from a lot of teams. It will take
Yep.
attention from a lot of teams, not just the Kraken either. Whether it's them, like if the Mariners don't do much of anything this year and they continue to be cheap, they continue to lose points with the fans, and they've done that for decades.
Hmm.
The Sounders are great, and I think they're the closest team to a title, but like basketball is just an easier sport for a lot of American fans to grasp, right?
Hmm.
So they'll just take and even for the first few years, they can be terrible. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter. And that'll be another conversation for how they're run for a different show. We eventually do. But yeah,
I was,
that's just where I'm at with them,
yeah, I was gonna say even we talked about the novelty with the Kraken wearing off, and I just when Seattle gets a basketball team back, I don't see that novelty wearing off for some time because of the history
Yeah. No, I
and
mean
how
just
desperately the fans want basketball back here.
just the history with men's basketball here, whether it be the Sonics previously or even the players that have come out of this area.
Hmm.
Like there have been players who come out of this area who talk about that and they
Yeah.
never played on the team, right? Kevin Durant played on the Sonics and he advocates for them all the time.
Hmm.
But, guys like Jamal Crawford, Zach LaVine, uh, you know, just to name a few who have, been pros there, DeJounte Murray, who went to UW. Like, there are guys who reference it all the time.
Hmm.
Isaiah Thomas. So it's like, it's there. And like, as someone who did previously work with the Kraken at their retail, like, the Kraken for NHL marks, I don't know how it stuck up to other sports, but like the general merchandise and obviously the jerseys, they broke records the hell out of the water when they started. Like they did such a good job with the branding, and it was new here.
Hmm.
Like I would hear when I was working there, fans would come from all over. They'd be like, "Oh, we're Fly." I'm not saying this just to say that. Like I heard Flyers fans that we came to Seattle because we wanted to check it out and we
Hmm.
bought merch. Like Ducks fans, Buffalo fans, like people loved it and they just might have a jersey. So
Just because.
yeah. And that will happen here and
Hmm.
probably a lot more for the Sonics. Like again, as much as people might not like it, and there are bad things about, the business and the greed aspect of these sports teams, you have to admit it at some
Yeah.
point. If you're gonna get into that much of a fandom, you have to at least be aware of it.
Hmm.
It's not fun to look at per se. Like in so many sports, it's terrible. Unlike hockey, hockey doesn't do that. To see the owner get the trophy first, right?
Hmm.
Like, I understand how bad all that is, but you have to be aware of that with some of the decisions that are made, and stuff like that. It's undeniable with the Mariners,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yep.
so all that to say,
Topic.
looking at their, it's just something that can't be denied, though.
Yeah.
Like it came into my head and when I was listening to all those radio shows on President's Day to hear what these because we don't get access to Todd like that. Like I'll see him
Hmm.
around and he'll say, "Hey Charles, how are you doing?" And he talks like
Yeah.
that. I'm not making fun of him. That's how he speaks. I'm not being mean to Todd. Like he sounds like that. Charles, how you
Hmm.
doing? You got to go down to Coachella Valley. You have to go see the Firebirds. I'm like, yes, Todd. When I can get down to Coachella Valley, I will. Um, I can only imagine what it was like being on the phone because there was the game last year where they played the Rangers and the lights went out and he was on the catwalk. I can only be imagine being on the phone. "Oh, what's happening with the lights? Like you guys have got to come. I'm up here right now. What do you need me to do?" Like I can only imagine being on the other end of that call. Um, oh, please, Todd, don't do anything to me. I'm sorry. Um, but like hearing him, it just in like comments, I thought I didn't have a second thought about what he said because it makes sense. They want to win
Hmm.
now. They're clearly not going to try to rebuild. You don't, you know, if they were going to do that, I feel like they've have started selling already. They wouldn't have
Yep.
waited until what, 2 weeks before. They would have. I was surprised that nothing happened over Four Nations generally.
Me
Like I guess
too. So
everybody
bummed.
was. I know you were trying to get it to happen. Um,
Manifesting.
but so generally nothing happened. It was
No.
weird. Like everything I had heard leading into it is that there would be at least discussions, and I feel like we didn't hear anything. I guess
Mhm.
everybody was just so fully tuned into it that they didn't care to call anybody else.
There was a couple like contract extensions,
Yes.
re-signings, but
Yeah. Like Vancouver
man,
got
give me a
someone
good
busy.
trade.
No, no one did anything fun. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just I'll briefly look at it again. We've done this already, but like,
Hey, Charles.
hey Jen,
Hey, where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of circling Seattle sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.